Hey guys, super excited today. I've got Ryan Levesque from the Ask Company. He's the Inc. 500 CEO of the Ask Method Company and a number one national best-selling author of Ask, which was named by Inc. as the number one marketing book of the year. His work has been featured in Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Forbes, and Entrepreneur, and over 250,000 entrepreneurs subscribe to his email newsletter, offering business advice. He's also a co-founder and investor in Bucket.io, a leading marketing funnel software for entrepreneurs. And here's where it gets exciting. His latest book, Choose, helps readers avoid making the single biggest marketing mistake when it's starting a business, and guides people through answering the all-important question: what type of business should you start? Man, that's awesome. Before we get into the new book, can you give people a bit of background about how you started and got in this whole entrepreneurial journey in the first place?
Yeah, first of all, it's awesome to be here. I've been looking forward to doing this interview for some time, so really grateful for the opportunity and pumped to just talk about all this great stuff. So for me, I'm not someone who grew up thinking that I was going to become an entrepreneur. I went to college, got a job. Was working to climb the corporate ladder, worked in finance, and I had a friend who came out to visit me when I was living in China. I lived in China with my wife for about 5 years before moving back to the United States. Living and working in China, he came out to visit me, and he's one of these guys that never had a job. One of these guys who started a business when he was in college and has been running it ever since. And he had never, had a real, quote unquote, real job in his life. And he was just telling me about how he was doing it, and he was able to travel the world and, make money while he sleeps and all these things. And here I was, the job I was in, I was, working, I was, living out of hotels, flying on an airplane every single week. I was traveling all the time, and I had no control of my life. And I wanted to make a change. And it was in 2008, so it's over 10 years ago now. 2008, when the world financial crisis hit, and I woke up one day, walked into my office, and the company I was working for, AIG, the insurance company, was in the news, and the headline of the Wall Street Journal Asia edition read, AIG to file for bankruptcy. And that was the kind of moment I realized the company I was working for was possibly going to go out of business. And so I called up my wife and said, honey, take a look at the newspaper. And that day, I typed up a resignation letter, printed it out, signed it, walked into my boss's office, and turned in my notice. And basically sold everything that I owned except for a suitcase. Moved in with, I said, it's funny not telling you the full background of the story, moved in with my wife. My wife was in grad school at the time while I was working in Shanghai. She was based in Hong Kong, so we had this crazy kind of bi-country marriage where we'd see each other like every other weekend. And moved back into student housing with my wife, and got to work starting my first business. So that's kind of how things all started. And I wish I could say it was success right out of the gate, but it was a very rocky start, some failures along the way. And in my new book, Choose, I share some of the wisdom that I've learned along the way, now having entered 23 different niche markets.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about those initial businesses you started?
Yeah, so the first business, so after I quit my job, I remember I was having, many a dinner conversation with my wife, and I was thinking about every business idea under the sun. It was one day it was, let's open up a restaurant. Next day it was, let's start a business teaching foreigners Chinese. Next day it was, let's start an import-export company. I mean, it was like all over the map. At one point, we thought we were going to open up a cupcake shop in Hong Kong, to the point that we actually started baking cupcakes in our apartment and like trying out different recipes and things like that. So like we were all over the map. And one day I was having a dinner conversation with my wife, and I was telling her crazy ideas, and she said, stop. How about this idea? And she turned her computer to me and she said, take a look at this website. It's this new website. It's like eBay for handmade goods. It is called Etsy.com. Now, Etsy is a huge site today, but back in 2008, it was not the business that it is today. So it was kind of a new thing. She said, take a look at this site. And she said, look at this jewelry that's selling like crazy. And at the time, there was this jewelry that was selling like crazy made from Scrabble tiles and origami paper. And she said, we should go into this business. She said, look, we're in Asia. We have access to all this origami paper. We are, have access to inexpensive labor in southern China. We could set up a little factory, manufacture this jewelry, and import it into America. And I said, that's a terrible idea. Like, that's not, I don't want to start that kind of business. Like, that's awful. And so we kind of closed the book on the idea and went on with our lives. And then a few weeks later, she brings it back up again in one of these conversations. And she says, I want to talk about that Scrabble tile thing again. And I said, I thought we closed the book on it. And she said, no. Take a look at this woman here. She's not selling the jewelry. She's teaching people how to make the jewelry instead. And she turned her computer to me and showed me this woman's shop on Etsy. And sure enough, this woman was selling this tutorial teaching people how to make Scrabble tile jewelry. Now, the crazy thing about Etsy is that you can look at a person's sales history. So you can go to a person's shop and you can look at how many sales they made today, how many sales they made yesterday, the day before that, and so on and so forth. And so we did this for this woman's shop, and we found that she was selling on average about 30 copies a day of this $30, $35 digital tutorial. We did the math and we said, holy crap, she's making like 10 grand a month. Like, this is insane. We're like, this is crazy. So my wife bought the product and it wasn't very good, she said. And she said, I can learn how to make this jewelry. So she learned how to make the jewelry and we created a better tutorial and we started selling it. First month we made like $100. Next month, I don't know, $200, $300, $500, $1,000. $2,000, $4,000, $5,000, $8,000 a month. I remember the month where we hit $8,000. I turned to my wife and said, honey, this is crazy. Like, we're going to get rich. Like, this is unbelievable, right? This is going to go crazy. And then literally the next month, our sales went down to almost zero. And it was at that moment that I realized that the whole Scrabble tile thing was just a fad. It was like, Beanie Babies or Pogs or Pokemon Go or any of these things that like explodes in a huge way and then just like drops off the face of the earth. So, that was our very first business. And, I wish I could say it was all, success right out of the gate. But we basically got to this place where we're in Hong Kong, one of the most expensive cities in the world. My wife's in grad school. I'm not making any money. We started running out of money because the cost of living is so expensive. And we kind of turned to each other and said, crap, like, what do we do now? And my wife finished grad school. We moved back to the States. She got a job. Her background is in history and art history. She got a job as a museum curator in Texas that paid about $36,000 a year. We had to get rid of everything we owned because we couldn't afford to bring our stuff back from Hong Kong to the States. So we just had a suitcase each. And we kind of started over. We had an apartment with 500 square foot apartment, bars on the windows, mattress on the floor, 2 lawn chairs in the living room, 1 car. I drive my wife to work, pick her up in the afternoon, and in between, I just started working on our next business. And the next business was in another kind of random, obscure niche market, and this one was in the market of orchid care. And the reason why I went into the orchid care market, as in like the flower, is because what I learned from that first business was the importance of going into a market that was going to be around for more than 5 minutes. I said, I don't want to ever build a business that is going to disappear in a matter of months. So I said, what are the, Scrabble tiles as a hobby, or the Scrabble jewelry as a hobby was something that was, gone in a blink of the eye. What are the hobbies that have been around forever? Like, what are the things that people have been doing forever that have no chance of going away? And as I was doing this research, I found that the number one hobby in America for like the last 100 years is gardening. Something like, 200 million Americans consider gardening to be a hobby. So I started doing research in different sub-niches and niches within the gardening market and came across orchid care as an idea because when we lived in China, we had a whole bunch of orchids and they all died. So, and started exploring the market and started pursuing it and took that business in the orchid care space from nothing to $25,000 a month in 18 months. At that point, my wife quit her job at the museum. She started working on the business with me full time. We moved to Austin, Texas, which is where we are now, and took that business to $500,000 a year. And Hello?
Hello, lost you there for a second. What I got last was you took the business to $500,000 a year. Hello?
I lost, I think the audio.
Yeah, I lost you for like 2 seconds, yeah. Heard
Okay.
you took the business to $500,000 a year, then it broke up.
Okay. All right. That was probably more than 2 seconds. Let's see. Where were we? So, okay. So, right. So, yes, we took that. So the orchid business took it from nothing to $25,000 a month in 18 months. And then my wife quit her job at the museum, and we moved from South Texas to Austin, Texas, and took that business from $25,000 a month to about $500,000 a year, and haven't looked back ever since. And so that business, the orchid business, I share those examples to show you an exercise in contrast. So the first one, Scrabble tile jewelry, it's nothing. The website still exists today. You can still look it up, but it doesn't really make any money. Versus the orchid business, here we are more than 10 years later, and that business still continues to pay for our living expenses to this day. And the reason why I share that is it underscores one of the first lessons I share in the book Choose, which is the importance of going into what I call an evergreen market. A market that's not going to disappear in a few months, but instead a market that's going to be around for decades. So you're building your business on a solid long-term foundation.
It's insane. Is that still growing, or is it just like stabilized at the $500,000 mark?
It just kind of hums around in the background. It's not something that we have to put a lot of time and effort into. There's a constant stream of traffic, a constant stream of new buyers and new customers in that market. I mean, you can look it up today. You can go to orchidsmadeeasy.com, and that business still exists today. And now we started with a single book. Now we have a DVD. We have masterclass digital courses on all the most popular orchid varieties, from Phalaenopsis to Paphiopedilum to Cattleya to Cymbidium to Oncidium. We have an orchid photography course, orchid watercolor course. We have a orchid hydroponics course. We teach people how to make their own fertilizer at home. We sell orchid jewelry. We have an entire product line in that business. It all started very humble beginnings, rising from the ashes of a pretty prolific business failure, the Scrabble tile jewelry market.
Wow, that is massive. Okay, moving on from there, what was the next thing? So you made this orchid business and it's going well. What happened? Why did you start doing what made you do something else?
Well, at that point, I thought it was a fluke, right? Because I just came off the failure of the Scrabble market, and I basically didn't think it was going to last, right? 6 months in, a year in, 2 years in, I said at some point the party's going to end and this is going to disappear. So I decided to diversify in yet another market. And this time we went into the memory improvement market. So improving your memory. The reason why I went into that market is at this point, so I'm the first in my family to go to college. Grew up very blue collar. Neither of my parents went to college. Dad worked nights, loaded boxes on the back of trucks. My mom cut hair in the basement of our house. And so I didn't have a paradigm for success. I didn't know what it meant to be financially successful. But I did know a path to get there was to become a doctor. And so when I went to college, I studied neuroscience and Chinese. And the reason why I studied neuroscience is because I thought I was going to go to medical school and become a doctor. And my parents thought the same thing. So when they found out that I was not going to go to medical school, but instead was going to work on Wall Street after college, they were okay with it. They weren't super thrilled, but they were okay with it. When I told my parents I wasn't going to work on Wall Street, but I was going to work in China instead, they were kind of like still okay with it, but not super thrilled. But when I told them that I was not going to go to medical school, I was not going to work on Wall Street, I was not going to pursue this, high-paying career in China, but instead I was going to give everything up to teach people how to make Scrabble tile jewelry, my parents thought like I went insane, right? So then they're still questioning me at this point. And the reason why I went into the memory market is I wanted to make my parents happy. Basically, I wanted to shut them up and make them happy. So I went into a market that I could at least create a connection between my academic background, what I studied in college, and what I was doing for a living. So it was kind of my way to do that. So we took that business to about $500,000 a year. And then I kind of realized that there was a process to this. And over the next few years, we ended up going into 23 different niche markets. And that's where the Ask method was born. I developed this process for going into niche market after niche market, figuring out what it is that people want, giving it to them, selling it to them, lather, rinse, repeat. And my first book, Ask, I share the methodology that we use to go into all these different markets. Now, when you write a book like Ask, what's really cool is that, and by the way, I'm getting a lot of background noise on your side. I'm not sure if it's something in your area or not.
I'm not entirely sure. That's right. I'm muted when you're not talking. That's right.
It's all good. Yeah, so when you write a book like Ask, it's it's sold hundreds of thousands of copies. It's reached people around the world. You get a bunch of emails and letters and messages from people who say the book changed their life, which is awesome. But you also get messages from people who say, I read your book and it didn't work. I tried it and it didn't work for me. And so when you get messages like that, it's kind of like a punch in the gut. So I started kind of diving down this rabbit hole that ended up turning into a 3-year research project to understand why people were failing. And of the people who failed, all roads kept pointing back to this one thing. And that one thing was people were choosing bad markets. And there's a metaphor I use in Choose in my most recent book that I think is helpful to understand this. It's sort of like this. It's like when you start a business, it's like tossing a raft in the middle of a river. And when you toss your raft in a river, you expect that river is going to get you to your destination, where you want to go. And just like when you start a business, you're expecting that business is going to take you to where you want to go financially, create freedom in your life and all the things that you're hoping to get from that business. And, you can have the best raft money can buy. You can hire a crew to be in that raft with you. You can buy the best equipment and you can row 18 hours a day. But if you put that raft in the river in the wrong direction, or worse yet, you throw that raft in a river that doesn't have any water in it, you're never going to get to that destination. And what I realized is that people were throwing their rafts into bad rivers that were never going to get them to where they want to go. And so in Ask, I revealed how we were successful in these 23 different markets. But what I didn't teach was why and how we chose those 23 markets in the first place. Like of the thousands of possibilities out there, why those 23? And that's what Choose is all about. It's all about how to make the single most important decision in your business, which is how to choose a good market.
So what do you go after when you're looking at market selection criteria?
So, there's a couple things, and I spoke to one of them, right? So, again, in my research, I looked at what were the factors that separated our most successful businesses from those that were less successful. I did the same thing with our students, with our clients. And what we found was that there are a total of 7 factors that will make or break your market to help determine what we describe as either a green light market, a yellow or amber light market, or a red light market. Green light market means pursue it. Amber or yellow light market means pursue with caution, and red light market means don't pursue at all. Now, the first of these criteria, we have something that we call the 5 market must-haves. So 5 things that you absolutely want to make sure that every market you consider pursuing checks off these boxes. And the first one is being an evergreen market. So we talked about Scrabble tile jewelry versus the Scrabble tile jewelry versus the orchid market. The orchid market, it's an evergreen market. The Scrabble market is a fad. It's just a market that came and went. And you absolutely want to make sure you're in an evergreen market. And again, I'll mention, I'm not sure if it's on our side or your side. I'm still hearing a lot of background noise. It seems like things are banging around. I'm not sure if it's like moving books around or something like that. I'm not sure what it is. So first is evergreen market. Second thing is you absolutely need to be in an enthusiast market. An enthusiast market is a market that, in contrast to a problem solution market, it's a market that people will be consumers in for years and years and years. So it's an enthusiast market. Third thing is an urgent problem. So you can't just go into an enthusiast market and like the dog market, for example, and sell T-shirts or dog mugs. You need to solve an urgent problem in that market. And you need to be in a market that has future problems as well. So you need market must-have number 4, a market that you can solve not only one problem, but other problems down the road. And finally, a market that's filled with number 5, PWMs, players with money. What that means is selling to people who are willing to spend money in that area of their life. You can't sell to broke people. That's a big mistake people make. So that's a very high level, very overly simplistic explanation. But that's the first test that you want to run through is, does your market check off the 5 market must-haves?
Hello. I also saw you did some really cool stuff with the way you launched the Ask Method community and how you tied software and other elements of wanting people to stay on to the community when you launched. Could you talk a little bit about that and how that impacted the business itself?
Yeah. One of the things that we found when we wrote Ask and released the book is that the methodology and the concepts made sense to a lot of people. Where people were struggling was around the technical implementation of it. And I struggled with this for years because a lot of what we'd done in our businesses involved custom development. So we, have a development team. We would build all the technology ourselves and we'd run with it. And the reality is there wasn't any tool on the market that was designed to implement the Ask method, to do all the surveys, all the quiz funnels, all the segmentation. And it was frustrating because I didn't have a solution to recommend to people. And that led us down the path of basically acquiring and later building a company called Bucket.io. And Bucket is the technology for implementing the Ask method. It's the tool to implement the technical side of asking people what they want and giving it to them by putting people down segmented paths and putting people into different buckets, as the namesake goes, and diagnosing and prescribing to give people exactly what they want and need. So it was out of necessity, really, that we decided to create that product and build that business.
That is incredible. And could you tell us a little bit more numbers behind that? So as people are coming in, as you add those kind of components like membership, like software, did that improve the retention rates of people staying in these communities?
Yeah, the trick with any recurring revenue model is to have your retention in a place where people are sticking around forever, right? It's relatively easy to get people to sign up for a trial for a piece of software or even a membership. The real challenge is getting them to stick for months and months and years. And what we found with our software is that when someone builds an Ask method funnel, a segmentation funnel, a quiz funnel in their business, and they're generating consistent leads and customers through that, they'll stick around forever. And why wouldn't you, right? If you have a piece of software in your business that you're paying, $100, $200, $300, $400, $500 a month, and it's making you $500, $1,000, $2,000, $10,000 a month, why would you ever cancel? So it intuitively makes sense, right? And that's very different from for example, say, information only based subscription, where it's a little bit more difficult to tie the revenue you're getting from something that's happening this month. Like you may have made money through information that you learned 6 months ago or 12 months ago. But the information that you learned this month, did it make you any money? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you reconsider if you should subscribe or cancel it. So, software in that regard is a lot tougher to build. It's certainly a lot more expensive to build. People always ask me, like, what advice do you have when it comes to building software? And I say, basically, do this. Withdraw $1 million from your bank account in cash, throw that money in a giant pile, light it on fire, and wait till it burns to the ground, and now you can get started. That's basically what building software is all about. Yeah.
Love it. That's probably true in most experiences I've heard from people. Going from there, mate, why are you doing this? Why are you deciding to teach all this stuff? Because you could have easily have gone and just launched into more markets, just kept doing that with your smaller team. I'm sure it would have taken less resources than building communities, building the software. What was it about teaching this method that was important to you?
Yeah, before I published my first book, Ask, that was my model. It was nobody knew who I was. I had all these little niche businesses, and life was very simple. and in many ways was great. And something happened in my life that kind of changed my perspective on everything. This happened about 7 years ago. I started losing weight. I started mysteriously losing weight, and we didn't. After my son was born, my wife asked me to apply for life insurance, and I did. And I applied. And when you apply for life insurance, they send a medical examiner to your house. They do a blood draw. They do some tests and some labs, and that goes into the life insurance decision making. And I came back from a trip that I had to go to after I did the application, and there was a letter waiting for me on my desk from the life insurance company. I opened it up, and the letter was a one-page letter from the company. It said denied coverage. So denied. Now, the only way you can be denied coverage in America, at least, from life insurance is if you have like something majorly wrong with you. Like you can be a drinker, you can be a smoker, you can be overweight, you can have all these health problems, and you can still get approved for life insurance. Like it's got to be something super serious. So I called up the life insurance agent, and I said, hey, I think there's a mistake. My results must have been passed and mixed up with somebody else. And I remember, he said, Ryan, it's not a mistake. In fact, you may want to sit down. I have your labs in front of me, and let me read you your results. He read me my numbers, and he said, he ended the phone by, he said, I'm not a doctor, but I think you should go see one. And then I made the biggest mistake of my life. I went to Google and typed in what the numbers meant, and the results came back with kidney failure, renal system shutdown, and pancreatic cancer. I just turned 30 years old. I have a 6-month-old baby at home. And I'm freaking out. And so later that night, I remember my wife asked, she said, hey, are we all set with the life insurance? And I said, we need to talk. And she broke down. She started crying. And she called the Ask a Nurse hotline and scheduled a doctor's appointment first thing the next morning. So went to the doctor's the next day and told the doctor the story. I still didn't believe that these were my results. I thought that they'd crossed my medical results with somebody else's and there was some mistake. And he said, well, hang tight. Let's get some blood work done, and we'll order it stat and just stay here in the waiting room. Don't even bother leaving. And I remember it like it was yesterday. He came out, grabbed me by the shoulders, looked me in the eyes. He said, Mr. Levesque, you should be in a coma right now. We're taking you to the emergency room, and you're not driving. And they rushed me to the emergency room, and I ended up spending the next 10 days in ICU, in intensive care, and found out that I'd fallen into a state known as diabetic ketoacidosis, and my organs were shutting down. And I emerged from the hospital as an undiagnosed juvenile diabetic. So most people find out that they're type 1 diabetic when they're kids, young, like 5, 6, 7 years old. And I found out that I'd gone all these years as an undiagnosed type 1 diabetic, and we don't know when the trigger event was that set things off. The reason why I'd lost all that weight is because my body lost the ability to metabolize food, and it was eating away muscle tissue. So I weigh about 100, I don't know what this is in kilos, but 185, 190 pounds now, and I was down to 130 pounds. So
wow.
I was about 60 pounds lighter. Yeah, it's and anyway, so I emerged as a type 1 diabetic. I have an insulin pump. I have basically an artificial pancreas. My pancreas stopped working. I had all these kind of other complications that happened as a result of being untreated for so many years. And when I was in the hospital, to answer your question and why I brought this up, it was the event that made me say, is this all I'm doing with my life? Right? I'd gone into these niche markets. I'd made, a decent amount of money for my family. But I just had this overwhelming feeling like there was so much more I could give, so much more I could do, so much more that I wanted to put out there. And, kind of when you come to terms with your own mortality like that, you realize none of us are promised tomorrow. And I kind of emerged from the hospital going 100 miles an hour and haven't slowed down or stopped ever since. And that's the reason why I decided to reveal what I consider to be my secret family recipe in the book Ask. That's the reason why I decided to write this second book, Choose. That's the reason why we've built this company, the Ask Method Company. It's why we built the second company, Bucket. It's why we have 65, almost 70 employees across both of our companies. It's why we've done all this, because it's a mission that I believe in. I've seen what this has done for my life, how it's transformed my life. I've now had the privilege of working with literally thousands of entrepreneurs through our programs, through our coaching and consulting programs, and I've seen how it's transformed their lives. I've seen how it's transformed their customers' lives, and it's just it's an amazing ripple effect that I think all of us in some way, shape, or form want to leave this world a better place, in whatever way we can. And the Ask Method is a way to better sell and better serve, builds a business at the same time. So that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's the thing that gets me up each day and gets me excited, and really excited for the future and the opportunity to work with more and more entrepreneurs.
Ryan, that's incredible. If people want to get the book, learn more about the other stuff you do, what's the best place for them to go?
The best place to go would be, and I think we have a special page set up for this, is choosethebook.com/Jos, Jos. And what that's going to do, it's going to take you to a special page to get a free copy of the book. So you can buy the book at any bookstore around the world. It sells for $24.99 in US, I think $33.99 in Canada. It's a hardcover book. And of course, you can buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, whatever your local bookstore is. But if you go to that special link, I'll ship you a free hardcover copy of the book anywhere in the world. All you got to do is just pay a few dollars shipping and handling. And when you do that, I'll also hook you up with over $200 in bonuses, including the audiobook for free. And one of the biggest questions I get from people is like, what are examples of niches that check off all these boxes that pass the 7 tests in the book? Well, I'm going to hook you up with my personal list of the 25 niche markets I would be going into this year that check off all those boxes and pass all the tests. So it's $200 in bonuses, free copy of the book. Just pay a few dollars, shipping and handling. Go to choosethebook.com/JOS. And get your copy. Limited supply, by the way, because this is for my own supply of books in our office. It's not for my publisher. So we'll do this as long as there are copies available. So go ahead and grab yours now, and love to continue the conversation from there.
Well, there you have it, guys. Go and get download the book from choosethebook.com/Jos, and we'll speak to you all on the next episode.